Veteran trader Krown is making an incredible chart analysis on Bitcoin, revealing bottom price predictions about Bitcoin and Ethereum. Let's subscribe to the channel and now dive into the interview.
All right, so when we're talking about the more recent price action of Bitcoin, I think the big question is, one, is this a bear market rally? And then two, where are we most likely probabilistically to end up? So that's kind of where I come from. I like to look at things from statistic background and just kind of let the chips fall where they may based off the probability. So in this case, if you're thinking in terms of the next couple of weeks here, going into September, this is the chart I would show you for a general bias on direction and in price targets based upon that. So first, I need to explain what's going on right here. What's going on is a volatility versus momentum signal. These are, kind of crazy words, so don't let them scare you, but basically it relates to two components. Volatility is the dispersion of returns. You can think of it like this. You can think of volatility in the sense that when things are highly volatile, they are moving a lot. When it's low volatile, then it's not moving all that much. Consolidation, essentially. Right now, we are looking at extreme lows on volatility represented by this metric right here. Whenever we see extreme lows, we have observed expansion phases from these extreme lows, of which you can backtest all of these past iterations here over the past couple of years. And there's been an average move of about 23.76% done over the course of just about 8.5 days. There's some variance there, by the way, some on the upper end about 14 days, some on the lower end about 5 days. And then the stochastic direction, this little moving piece right here, has gone the correct direction on that volatility expansion for about just under 90% of the time. So highly accurate. Doesn't mean that's perfect. We're talking about statistics, not certainties, of course. So in this case, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because we are on the precipice of a pretty major signal. I would even argue that we're probably going to see this signal fire off today, at most tomorrow. And for right now, the stochastic momentum oscillator is pointed to the downside. That does suggest that this is a lot more likely to continue to the downside over the next couple weeks here, let's say 7 to 14 days, put a nice little range on that. And because we do have an average for what these moves typically do put in, which again, there's going to be some variance. For example, the last one was only about 11.67%, and the one before that was 38.37%. Quite a big difference right there. But if we were to apply that to our current high and look for that move to play out, that would put Bitcoin perhaps as low, if I can actually do this properly, as about 19 to 20,000 bucks. Again, keeping in mind their variance. To be fair, that would still be a higher low on this market, which I do think is a rather interesting point, simply because a lot of people are bringing up this term bear market rally right now. In fact, because everyone's bringing it up so much, I decided to go on Google Trends and see how popular that actually is. And you can see over here that bear market rally is pretty much ranking about as high as what we saw back on over in 2020 after that would be March 2020, by the way. And with that in mind, the old saying goes, when everyone's thinking the same thing, typically the opposite happens. So could I make the argument that perhaps this is more than likely a bear market rally? Yes, I certainly agree with that, especially assuming that this signal does play out, of which we are very close to confirming that. Well, that could imply that Bitcoin does come back down to, somewhere reasonably close to the lows, but puts in a higher low, thus making everyone kind of, bearish on the way down, looking for these $10,000, $15,000 targets, which keep on hearing about all over social media venues, and then maybe flip it around. I think that's kind of best case scenario for right now. Of course, this signal is unconfirmed as of right now. And while the probabilities will be massively on the downside, as long as this is pointed toward the downside, which, by the way, it will be to the downside as long as Bitcoin is below 24,700. Well, I would not entertain the upside possibilities of this just yet. If it were to flip back around and close above that number, then yes, we could talk about targets towards $28,000 to $29,000. How do I know that? Because that's basically 23% from our current price action, right in line with that gap from June breakdown on CME chart. So that's kind of where I'm at right now for the next couple weeks leading into September. I think September is a rather interesting month, however, because of a few things. So let's bring you over to this chart right here. September is generally a bad month for Bitcoin and by extension, the rest of the cryptocurrency market because they more or less trade together. Yeah, there's some differences here. Most everything trades together. So I did an analysis of all of the past Septembers in Bitcoin's history. And something interesting here, 9 out of 13 Septembers were down. So that's 69%. If we go a little bit deeper into the data, 11 out of 13 of those Septembers were not just were down or basically unchanged. So, nothing really happened for about 2 of those months, and only 2 Septembers. In fact, I think it was the first 2 Septembers, it was a decent up month. So historically speaking, September, a bad month, and the average downside move in September is about 26.24%. So again, kind of coming around the same numbers right here, depending upon where we actually close coming into September. So I do think that is still best case scenario that Bitcoin, comes down reasonably close to our current lows, grinds them out a little bit, maybe even a little bit lower, and then flips back around. The reason why I would not at the current moment in time say that in its lows is because of this chart right here. This is a big one for me when talking about the very long term. In the very long term, when we're talking about macro bottoms, there has never been a macro bottom in Bitcoin's history, not once ever, never, without this indicator, which is the accumulation distribution indicator, which measures, well, exactly that. And without coming down to this green horizontal line that my cursor is currently on right now. So you can backtest this yourself. I've already marked them off with these green vertical bars. You can see that they correlate reasonably close to the macro lows for all of the past cycles. And for right now, we are getting closer to it. In fact, coming into August, there was a big downtick closer to that nice green level. And as it gets closer and closer, it will naturally hit probably in September, maybe October, which would be the next sort of thing that I would want to see in order to believe that Bitcoin is in the process of putting in a macro low, basically around this $20,000 level, give or take, a small percentage from that number. What I also thought was interesting from this chart, however, still kind of, yes, go ahead.
That accumulation distribution, that's basically just buying and selling?
Yes, so it's measuring the net delta between buys and sells. So exactly that, yes.
Okay, keep going. I'm with you.
Right. Okay, awesome. Yeah, and if there's any questions, you be the one to let me know. I know that sometimes I can, skip a few steps here and there. So
I'm loving it.
Hopefully this is all coherent.
Solid perspective.
Amazing. Okay. So also on this indicator, when you do look at the times when it turns red, so here, and here, the times when it turns red to the times when Bitcoin actually puts in that macro low, there's been an average correction of about 61.34%. So you can kind of see this over here, for example, from the time it turns red, boom, right there to the actual low, about 56.90 in this case, 62.5 right there. If we were to do the same thing for when it turned red in this current cycle in May, actually, you'll notice that if we were to apply that average correction, that would put Bitcoin somewhere down around about $15,500. So when asking ourselves, are we in the ballpark of where a low would reasonably be? I would say yes. I mean, that's not that far away from the current low of $17,500. Again, this is a perspective thing, obviously, but anywhere around there, kind of makes sense as far as that goes. And then, of course, if we want to take this one step further as to why I still don't think that there's a low end just yet, we still haven't seen the exact conditions that I really want to see. I'd bring you over this chart over here, which is another stochastic momentum oscillator. It's just measuring momentum. You don't need to know too much about it. All you need to know is the more practical sense, as you can see, where anytime the monthly has come around these extreme lows, these have actually correlated incredibly well, as you can see when I match them up with the green, all of the macro lows in Bitcoin's history. Not exactly perfect, but close enough in this case. And as you can see, we're going to see that region tested coming into September as well. So I do think best case scenario for Bitcoin is we do see a low, or at least start to really dig into the low in September. So, if I had to call it right now, best case scenario, Bitcoin puts in a low in September, which does mean that Bitcoin does take another tumble. How far down does it come? which I do not actually have a current opinion on as far as that goes.
So you think your best guess is that it will break 17,000 sometime in September, and how far it goes is anybody's guess?
So my disposition right now is actually I do not have any indication that Bitcoin is going to continue past the current low, but I don't have any indication that Bitcoin's actually bottomed just yet. So if those signals start to come closer to those relevant levels that have marked off macro bottoms, at that point, yes, I would start to really consider that, September, October, Bitcoin's going to start to put in a bottom. Keep in mind, though, when we're talking about, a bottom, it doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin and all of the cryptocurrencies will immediately just rebound, going back onto the heavens and beyond, like we saw in the past couple of years. It's very unlikely to be like that. It's very likely that it will take, months, maybe even years for it to kind of grind out sideways. Of course, you have the halving and whatnot going on as well. And I think it's 2024. Is it 2025? I'm not quite sure actually, but that would be kind of around the time when I'd really be okay. There we go, 24. There we go. Yep. That'd be around the time where I'd really start to look for things to level off, reaccumulate, and start an actual momentous move to the upside. But as far as the I do want to answer your question directly though. So what I'm really trying to do here is come up with a high probability area where I would be looking for a low. So currently, $17,500 to $15,500 to make that. It could very well be that Bitcoin's basically seeing the strong majority of this move. Personally speaking, if Bitcoin does fail very specifically below $15,500 on a higher term timeframe closure, I do think that we're going to be witnessing something much more destructive than any of us can really think about right now, and we'll probably see below $10,000. I do not think that there will be any bottoming in the 12,000, 14,000, these sort of areas that I think get thrown around quite a fair bit right now on social media. 85% was, I believe, I'll actually share my screen just really quickly here. So 85% was kind of par for the course when you were back over in the beginning, like the genesis of Bitcoin over here, right? So in this case, you see a nice 92.5% move to the downside. In this case, you see about 84, but you'll notice as time goes on, these corrections aren't as severe. This one's about 82, so it's starting to lose. In this case, the old Rona dump, about 70% right there. So it is kind of losing that over time, at least from my perspective, and that does make sense as a maturing asset. And for right now, how far down have we actually seen? We've seen 74%. I would say that's close enough, really. When we're talking about, very specific numbers like this, you have to be asking yourself, if you're very long-term, does that make a humongous difference? Is it worth the, is it worth the wait and potentially missing it?